Welcome back to the channel today, guys. And on this episode, we are going to completely go overboard with the weathering for our Panzer II. As always, we're going to use our Vallejo thick mud. It's an acrylic paste. It's probably my favorite textured paint to use. It has a very nice in-grade sediment, very easy application, and you can dilute it with water. As always, we always test at the bottom because it is a fairly good place to check our paint consistency and just to do an overall test of the paint on the model that's relatively not seen. So here we're just going to apply some of the mud texture to the road wheels because those obviously do get fairly muddy. And if we're a little bit too much overboard, we're going to use water. Here we're going to use our another trick where we use Tamiya's buff to just kind of fill in all of those really empty spots and add some more smoother transitions to the weathering. Now, like I said, we go completely overboard, and although the color is something that I wasn't really a fan of here because it doesn't really catch on camera, but this paste is kind of like a very, very light, we are going to still use our Mig Jimenez line of weathering products so that way we can color our muddy texture. So first off, we're just going to apply some light soil here because we did want to make this kind of like a dusty tank. I'm not really sure what I was going for here, but I know that I did want a dusty light mud texture here. Again, I will reference that I went completely overboard. Again, if there's any doubts about how it will look, you just test it out on the bottom of your model. As you can tell, after the acrylic mud dries, it does leave some really, really good, impressive textures for our model. This serves as a really good test palette for the rest of our tank so we can see how the colors are going to match with our tank as well. And if we're satisfied, we're just going to continue to apply this to our road wheels. Now, if there is a self-critique, the one thing I did wish was that I kind of left the weathering to the outside of the wheel base and not cover the whole thing. Although with the idler wheel, I think that's okay, as well as this drive sprocket. I think that's an okay texture. And it's also pretty good color too. I know the camera doesn't really pick it up and it kind of looks more like yellow, but in natural light it does look very brownish beige, which is a good light dirt texture. And this is just going to be our preliminary coloring. We are going to color change and we are going to match it. Now, this back piece here is definitely part of like one of the favorite parts of this model. I left off the whole rear fender bit. I also cut off the little tab, and I added real dirt to the top of the model, and I just made this section super muddy, super dirty. You know, because a lot of the tanks in World War II, they were missing fenders, and if you run over some very muddy spots, then you get a lot of mud kicked up in places. So here we're going to go with our earth tones, and we're just going to slightly darken it because, I mean, sand is really the only color that is that light. So we are going to make it more of a muddy color, so we are going to darken it with a little bit of earth tones. And we're going to do that to every part of the model, but with this I kind of wanted to not cover the whole road wheel. I just kind of wanted to make it some areas where the mud was still either damp or still fresh instead of completely dried. So in that aspect, I feel like this actually did come out pretty well. And again, as always, test it out on the bottom. You get some really good color modulation here. And overall, it's just a really nice way to, again, test how it looks on the model. You could also see how the colors blend and how they dry together, and they also dry at a different color than what you originally posted. Continuing here, we're going to go with our loose ground, and this one is definitely more of a lighter brown. So I think this is what I wanted to go for, just a light brown. And you can see the earth tones did dry and they do look pretty good. And now we're just going to come by and we're just going to cover it with kind of the color that I was really looking for in this tank when I did it. It does look very out of place, but it obviously when it does dry, it is going to look a lot better. And we're going to want to pay special attention to the back here, because this is going to be kind of the focal point of this model. And doing this model, any tank model, obviously you want to get the whole picture, but you want to kind of do things to make the model interesting. So with here, I kind of try to change the interesting parts from the front of this aggressive looking tank to the rear, especially this rear quarter panel that you have there by the exhaust. So we want to pay extra special attention to this area and give it its rightful coloring. And as you can see, I did do some of the speckling pattern, which I get into a little bit later in this video, but you do want to speckle that portion of the model because this is where the tank goes back into the return rollers, so it is in that direction, so a lot of mud and dust is going to come up there. And we just want to make sure that we get every part of this here. It is very important that we make the parts that make sense look like they're very muddy. And for this side, I just went ahead and I speckled it. This model was kind of a test piece, I will say. For some of the future models that I'm doing, even though I did cover this tank in the same colors, I kind of applied different techniques to different sides of the tank. So for instance, on the left side here, I did a speckling method with the loose ground, and then on the other side, I kind of covered it completely, and I wanted to see what the difference would be. But at the end of the day, I think it looks pretty good, and you can't really tell which side is tested on and which side isn't tested on, but this is what we got, guys. I personally really like this tank. I like the way that it came out, even if some of the mud does look a little weird. But again, I think it's interesting and different. And again, thank you guys so much for coming by the channel today. If you can, please leave a comment, or you could like, subscribe if you enjoy the content. If there's any models that you would like to see me do, then definitely leave a comment below, and maybe I could add it to the stash, and maybe you'll see it on the channel. I think that'll be pretty good to get you guys involved a lot more. Anyway, guys, thank you for swinging by. I'll catch you guys for the next video.